A big bank CEO is warning about the economy and the stock market. And we'll go over our stock market outlook, so stay tuned for more. Thank you for watching. This is Richard with Wisdom Investor. So we got a big bank CEO warning about the economy and the stock market. We're going to take a look at that. We're also going to take a look at what's going on with earnings, what happened last week, and what's ahead of us for earnings. We're going to look at our stock market sectors, where we think money might be rotating. So I want to thank you for joining us. Stick with us for the entire segment. We talked about a CEO. We have Jamie Dimon here of JP Morgan warning for the U.S. economy. Nobody knows what's next. We mentioned a moment ago about earnings season. Here it says market heads into worst earnings season in 12 years amid worries viruses slowing recovery. So we started off earnings season this last week here. Let's just take a look at some of the companies that did very well. Earnings that were up. We had JP Morgan, we had BlackRock here, Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, and PepsiCo. Those were some of the stocks that were up. However, it wasn't that great for everybody. Let's take a look at some of the earnings that were down. We had Bank of America, Citigroup, Netflix was down. We had Wells Fargo down, also cutting earnings. And we had Levi Strauss down. We also had Macy's and Nike, which reported about a week ago. They were down. So Wells Fargo actually was cutting their dividend. So we start to get into the meat of the earnings this week and next week. We have IBM reporting on Monday, along with a few other companies, not as big name as IBM though. Tuesday, we've got Coca-Cola, Texas Instruments, Snap, and United Airlines. Wednesday, Microsoft, Tesla, Chipotle, CSX. Thursday, we got AT&T. We have Union Pacific, Southwest Airlines, Intel, and others. Friday, Honeywell, American Express, and Verizon. So back to what JP Dimon was warning about the economy and the stock market. We're not going to know what's going to happen until these earnings are announced. A lot of companies are not giving guidance of going forward. They're not saying how good or bad it's going to be. Most likely it's going to be how bad it's going to be. So they don't want to say anything. That may keep the market from dropping quite as much as it really could if we get a lot of negative news to the downside. But these earnings coming up is going to be very important. We'll be looking at where we think this market's going to be topping out here in just a moment. We're going to take a look at some of the pluses and minuses of what's keeping this market going. We're looking at the continuing claims for unemployment insurance. Currently, the continuing claims is 17.3 million. An incredible number. You can see where we were running prior to the virus being let go. 17.3 million. Typically in a downturn market, 400,000 and above was considered bad news. However, 17.3 million. It's amazing that the market is holding up like it is. Now, one of the things that keeps holding this market up is when we get reports about the vaccine coming. We're going to have a report on Monday on the latest news from vaccines, but the vaccine coming continues to help prop the market up higher. Also, this week and next week, we'll be hearing about what's going to happen with the stimulus package. However, most likely, this is going to come through. So those are the things that are hurting and helping the market. We've got the unemployment, incredible numbers to the upside on unemployment. And then we have the vaccine possibly coming out, and we've got the stimulus. Most likely, something's going to come out on the stimulus by August 1st. That's got to be positive for the markets. We're going to take a look at some of the charts here and where we think market's headed now. Here's a chart about what the Fed's doing as far as pumping up the market, the Fed juice here. This chart was put together by Shane Schmolian. What we're looking at here in the green line, the cyan line here, this is the Fed juice as they're pumping up the market. And then the white line here is the S&P 500. So the Fed has been pretty much pumping up the market all along. Then we had the drop in the markets here. The Fed has continued to pump up the markets now. What's interesting right now, we're seeing a little bit of a decrease in the Fed stimulus here in the market. Now, so far, the market's pretty much going sideways here. But if this does continue to the downside, that may have some type of effect. I would say, worst case, we get a drop. Best case, the market goes sideways. Now, if the Fed starts pumping this market back up again, that's going to be very positive for the markets. Now, here's a chart, a cycles projection by Larry Williams, one of the top chartists out there in the market over the last 30-40 years. The red line there is his projections. We did get a low here in March. You can see the S&P 500 dropping, and of course this cycle projection showed the low here, where he's saying the market's going to top out as 727 around July 27th or so. He thinks the market's going to be topping out. Of course, that's not an exact date, but could be close. And then he's saying a bottom possibly around August 26th. Here's a cycles chart of the S&P 500. This is as large as I could blow this up, but this is by Stan Harley. He's a top stock market timer. And what he's found over the years is that the market hits a low point about every 40 days or so. Again, that's not always perfect, and sometimes the cycles can get adjusted, but he figures about every 40 days or so. Here in the past, prior to the coronavirus drop, they were running about every 42, 44 days. Then we had the drop in the market, and here we have our rebound. So what he's saying, based on his cycles forecast, we're looking at a top around August 13th. Again, may not be perfect, but that's what his projections, and a low in the market around October. He's saying October 30th. Now here's an 86-year seasonal cycle for the Dow Jones Industrials. We've looked at this before. So here we are in July. We're in mid to late July right now. And so the seasonal forecast over 86 years for the Dow Jones Industrials, this is a compilation of all the markets each year in the Dow Jones Industrials. And so we're showing a top here coming real soon in the Dow Jones Industrials based on past history, and then the market heads back lower down into October. Now that doesn't always happen like that, but basically our seasonality here is in the weakest part of the year. So August, September, October, we very likely could expect some type of a low in the markets. So we looked at what a couple of experts have said about past history in the markets as far as cycles. So we're looking at possibly a top here soon in the markets, with August, September, October being a low. We also looked at the Dow Jones Industrials history. So I think we're going to be topping out here soon. Now, here's what the wild card is. If we get some type of good news on vaccine or stimulus, that can override this whole projection. So where could money rotate here? It's possible money starts to rotate into the big blue chips here, like the Dow Jones Industrials. Another area that could be a beneficiary of a stock rotation would be the small caps. So if money starts to rotate out of the blue chips or the techs, small caps could be the beneficiary and move higher. So we'll keep our eyes on the small caps. Let's look at some of the areas that are still holding strong. This is gold. Gold is still holding here at the top. So with the possibility of inflation going higher, that is going to be positive for gold. Here's the GDX. They're right at the top here. The GDX is the gold miner. So gold miner stocks and the GDS are looking good here. Biotechs. Here's the XBI. Biotechs continue to be to the upside. Home builder stocks. This is XHB as in Bravo. Home builder stocks continue to move higher. The healthcare sector, XLV, S&P 500 healthcare sector continues to grow higher. So biotechs are looking good. Healthcare sector is looking good with the possibility of some type of a vaccine coming available here sometime soon. Interesting enough, we have the XLU, that's the utility sector, also pushing higher. So earning news is going to be real big this week coming up. We can already see that some stocks took a hit to the downside. So we're going to be watching earnings real closely. We also have the stimulus news coming out. That may have a little bit of impact on the markets. We looked at our history and what we can project here for the markets, a possible peak here coming soon with lows sometime down in August, September, and October.